they might actually be successful. That might actually work. I'm trying to be hopeful because the book is over 1,000 pages and it involves incestuous ideas and it's entirely politically incorrect. And you want to take a shower every time you read a paragraph. And it's very hard to turn into a movie. And the TV series, aside from Tim Curry and a great cast, certainly didn't do it justice. So I'm gonna give this flick a chance.
No, the TV miniseries tried though, and I think Stephen King's books serve best as miniseries, so you have time to flesh it out. Though
Word.
I did see the poster for the Dark Tower, which I didn't realize they were doing a theatrical movie and TV.
Yes.
Show. But I guess the theatrical, I didn't look anything up on it, but I'm guessing the theatrical is to kick off the TV show, maybe.
Man, I have no idea. I remain skeptical.
Because people threw a fit because Idris Elba was cast as the gunslinger, which I haven't. I know, shock. I haven't read the Dark Tower series because one, I have a lot of stuff to watch, and two, I was like, oh man, that looks like something I really just need to kind of hunker down and watch. But people threw a fit because they cast him, and I'm like, it's Idris Elba. I'm like, I'd cast him in anything if I had the chance.
Absolutely. I will say this in defense of King fans, though. They announced him and Matthew McConaughey's casting at the same time. And Matthew McConaughey is not only the person most people picture as the gunslinger, he matches the illustrations that King himself authorized to be in the book. So there was a slight discrepancy in terms of the reporting of the film when it was first released. I mean, Matthew McConaughey is sort of the person that's on the cover of the books and in all of the art. He fits it. So I don't think I would necessarily place it into that, this black guy is taking over our role. I would say that McConaughey is the person that we'd always envisioned, and it was falsely reported, up front at least, that, he might be the gunslinger. So it was more like, wow, really? It was like this weird flip. I love it because I like strange, weird shit that pisses me off. Anything that's weird, bring it on. Please challenge me. But I can see why fans are like, okay, you have McConaughey in the movie and he's not the gunslinger. That's kind of weird. I think it's a justifiable thought, I think.
So you think he actually looks like the gunslinger? I thought he actually looks more like Flag, and I think that, honestly.
Well, I'm referring to a lot of the Did you read the illustrated versions of King's novels? I haven't read that.
No, I've only got one for a birthday gift that I gave someone, and that was it.
Well, his novels were, you can obviously buy just the plain paperbacks and hardbacks without the illustrations, but you can buy illustrated versions of most of the novels, aside from the comics, aside from the graphic novels. He did authorize, like he did with Cycle of the Werewolf, illustrated versions of his novels. And the gunslinger is, thin and gaunt and cheekbones, sort of bouncing out of his face. So I'm just speaking for King fans that have followed the story since the beginning, because for a lot of us, honestly, the Dark Tower is our Lord of the Rings. It really is. And I'm all down for Idris Elba. Believe me, I'm 100% on board with that. I'm just trying to speak up for King fans who aren't racists, who are just like, whoa, really? You cast McConaughey in the work and he's not the lead. I can see a bit of like an eyebrow raise there.
Before you really judge it. After you see it, if you think it sucks, well, then there you go. But
absolutely, man.
I've always said that you can be hesitant, you can have some reservations, but to completely hate on anything before it even comes out, it's like we were talking about with Chips. It's like, I saw the trailer and I had reservation, like, but trailers can be misleading, but in this case it wasn't misleading. So so I think we're gonna get started here. So all right, we've actually been live for a little while. I just
really?
I just kicked it in for a little while. So, like, the last 10 minutes or so have been actually live. So
it'll be with talk about the Dark Tower series.
Yeah, well, that'll get cut out in the episode, but we'll leave it in on the we'll leave it in here on the Google Hangout out on the Google chat. And so, okay, so yeah, we'll get started. Derek says he may join us if he can get things settled down at his home. So he has his daughters are still up and about. So
right on, man.
Okay, so let's do this. And welcome to the spoiler room. It's our last episode for Animated March, our last special animated, looking at mature animated films. And I thought, what better way to close out the month than talking about the original animated film, Ghost in the Shell. Now, Ghost in the Shell, as we all know, we have a live action version coming out as the time of this recording. It'll be tomorrow. But I figured we'll talk about the original anime film. And tonight I have a great crew with us here to talk about this film. First off, we have Mr. Cole Merritt with us tonight. Hello, Cole.
Hello, Mark. Thanks for having me. And just so you know, I feel confined only to free to expand myself within boundaries.
That's good to know. Well noted. And next to Cole is the bow tie man himself, Mr. Paul Salzer. Hello, Paul.
Hello, guys. I'm within my boundary of my bow tie, so
his consciousness is trapped within his tie. And with Ghost in the Shell, the summary per IMDb is the year is 2029. The world has become intensively information orientated. Wow, that sounds familiar. And humans are well connected to the network. Again, familiar. Crime has developed into a sophisticated stage by hacking into the interactive network. To prevent this, Section 9 is formed. These are cyborgs with incredible strengths and ability network on Earth. And we have a cyborg policewoman who works for this organization, and her partner hunt down a mysterious yet powerful hacker called the Puppet Master. Now, Ghost in the Shell did come out in 1995 as an anime film. I remember it coming over in the States, and this was many people's introduction to the world of anime. Cole, do you remember when you first saw Ghost in the Shell?
I do, man. Honestly, not to sound cliche, but it was after I went nuts for The Matrix, I started to go back and delve into anime and educate myself in that area. And the first thing about Ghost in the Shell that struck me when I first saw it was how influential it was on just so many things that I already loved, and not just obviously the Matrix series, but things like Dark City and so many action films and science fiction films have taken influence from this. I mean, this is very influential, not only in the dialogue and in the nature of the thing, but in the visual presentation, in the detail of what happens on screen. I mean, for a cartoon, you can see a lot happening in every frame. For instance, in scenes with crowds, there aren't only people passing. There are like dogs. You can see what people are eating. It's highly detailed and well thought out. And yeah, the first time I saw it, probably 2001, maybe 2002, it blew me away. And the second time was tonight, actually. We rented it, and I was floored again. I just couldn't believe how much detail and thought and substance was in this sucker. And it's exciting too. I mean, you get into it, you get wrapped up in it, and it's good. This is great anime, man. I love it.
I definitely excellent points there. And Paul, how about you and your first time with the Ghost in the Shell?
I watched this when I was in college. It wasn't at the time that it came out. But I was into anime in college, and this, I would say, is my third favorite anime of all time.
Really? Wow.
Yep.
Wow. And what was it that first grabbed you about Ghost in the Shell when you watched it?
Like Cole is the realism of it. Plus, I was into Shadowrun in college, and we liked to play the kind of cyberpunk thing. I loved Neuromancer and those type of stories. So I was very much into cyberpunk as well as goth at the time. And this movie really fulfilled my need for cyberpunk, and it hit. And then later on, to see how much it's influenced movies, it's really nice to see, and it's really nice to see now a resurgence in activity with anime. You see all these live action movies coming out that are based in anime and manga, and I would love to see more of that. I love to see the trend, and I hope it continues. I really do.
Well, I mean, there have been over the years many live action films, but not many made in the U.S. Or brought to the U.S. live action versions of anime films. I'm looking at you, Wicked City, that weren't exactly done well. Wicked City. Compared to the source material, because obviously for some, the fanciful elements alone are kind of tough to replicate a film like this in anime. I'm going to say that when I first watched this film, I didn't get it. When I was younger, I didn't get actual anime, most of it. I watched some of it because my friends were in it, but I wasn't a really strong fan of it. I watched it casually, and there were some series that I watched where I couldn't really follow much at all, and especially like the TV series. Go, oh well, I'll see what these episodes are like. Couldn't follow anything what's going on. And in Ghost of the Shell, I liked the art when I first saw it in '95. I didn't see it in the theater either. I saw it when it came out on video, but I didn't quite get it either. I didn't, and maybe I'm just not the brightest bulb on the tree. But
No,
a
lot.
I don't think that's it.
Yeah, a lot of anime is so different from Western animation that
Yeah.
it's totally understandable. And the best thing is, like, my interpretation of the film might not be the same as Cole's, and it might not be the same as yours, and that's what makes it great. So it doesn't matter if you didn't get it the first time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That makes me feel better. But yeah, I didn't quite get it. I haven't revisited this in a long time, so that's kind of why I wanted to do the show as well, and not just as prep work for what we'll touch on later. But and watching it again, I'm like, I get it more, but I am 20 years older, from when I first saw it, and a little bit more experienced and have watched other varieties of films, and I really dug it, and it surprised me, as you mentioned, the detail especially, but also detail in the art, not necessarily so much detail in your this. I mean, you still get exposition and detail, but as far as the world goes, you kind of just get dropped into 2029, and you don't get a huge amount of explanation of how things work. They kind of like briefly touch on it and move on, which I think one of the things right there, especially for when it coming out in 95, is a difference in the style of storytelling versus what Hollywood back then, where it holds your hand more. Paul, would you say that this film, while it does give you a little bit of details in the world, it just kind of drops you into it, where as US animated stories especially, they kind of want to explain everything for you?
I agree. Yes, definitely that is the case. In this film, I think you're watching the film as it goes along, and they're giving you subtle hints, and you don't piece it together until the very, very end, when the puppet master explains kind of what's going on and why things are happening. But in a way, you get this mystery which you can kind of enjoy as you're watching it, and I think that just adds a little bit of a lot more excitement to it. And yes, it is very different than, again, a Western a Hollywood type of movie, which does kind of handhold you because they don't want to lose their audience. And I think the understanding of like my favorite anime is Akira, and that is just I mean they talk about this concept of the universal amoeba. I'm like, what? That movie I didn't understand at first either. But it was this it opens up your mind, and it is truly like art because it makes you think of things in a much different way. And I think that that's the magic of this film. So yeah, definitely is done differently, but it does it so well.
Mm-hmm. And Cole, how about you? Did you notice in that difference in narrative with this, even some of the other animated films we touched on in the past, but just the way Western storytelling is versus this, especially for 90s films?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, for all of the reasons that Paul described, I can't really add on to what he said other than to agree. The one storytelling technique I'd like to touch on, as long as we're on the subject, is the musical montages that sort of allow you to embrace the environment without the main characters. And I think there's like two of them that go on for about 3 minutes. And those are so important to me because about a third of every movie that I personally make consists of those. Because when you deprive your audience of the environment that the characters exist in, I don't think you can ever fully appreciate the world of the film or the short or whatever visual medium you happen to be experimenting in. But there's a couple montages here with very simplistic music, no dialogue, no lead characters that just kind of allow you to sit and embrace the environment. And that's so important. I mean, that's so important to me personally in terms of just creating, to me, to what I consider to be a good movie. A good sense of environment, a good sense of the sets, a sense of geography, a sense of atmosphere, a sense of emotional connection with the characters and the world that they're existing in is everything. And this movie gives you that, and it's animation. They didn't have to give you that, and they do it well. There's a clip here during one of those sequences I mentioned where there's a dog staring directly at the camera. I mean, pretty creepy. I think that's great. But yeah, I agree with what Paul said, and can't really add more to it.
Now, the version that you watched, Cole, was it the actual original 95 version, or was it the redone 2007? I think it's Ghost in the Shell 2.0.
No, I was sure. Well, I double checked with you, and I went right to the 95 version because when I first started looking at things, I was amazed at how many versions popped up. I was like, oh, holy shit. So I was sure to go to the 95 version.
Okay.
Do you guys not remember that? And what you
no, I do remember that. I just wanted to check before because there were variations especially with the re-release on the CGI in that, which we'll talk about in a little bit. As far as the style of animation that went on. But I want to talk first about the character of the Major, if you. I mean, that's how she's referred to, as the Major in this. And one of the things I really enjoy about her character is she's a really strong character in here. It didn't feel like they took some of the standard tropes that we've seen in other films, either animated or live action, with your strong female character. Would you say, Cole, that they kind of avoided those?
Possibly. I mean, the character is just so unique and just so kick-ass. And when I first saw this film back in 2001, I didn't have, and again, this is so American and cliche of me to say, but I didn't have much aside from Neo to compare her to. But I think she's amazing and unique and ambiguous in many ways, which I'm sure you guys will touch on. I remember a review I read from Roger Ebert, positive review, made the case that she was in fact, a male in her ghost. So yeah, I think she's entirely unique. I think she's a great character. I think the nudity while she's kicking ass is impressive and key. It bums me out that we will get to the newer version later. But I do think the fact that she's, diving off of buildings stark ass naked and just beating men to a pulp, rocks.
Yeah, it was cool to see. I really enjoyed her character. Now, did you mention saying that her ghost was male?
Well, I'm just mentioning Robert Ebert's review that
Oh, right.
I'm not speaking for myself. I'm
right. I see, and I didn't quite think that, but I mean, I like the whole idea of ghosts because these people are pretty much complete cybernetic beings, if you will. Some of them are humans with cybernetic implants, but for the most part, she's pretty much completely cybernetic, except for little bits of brain, according to what they mentioned in there, that have her ghost, the memory of the human she's actually based off of. And I didn't get quite that it was a male ghost in her. I just thought she was a pretty badass female.
Well, I think the thing was that she was like asexual. That the point was, that a confusion of identity.
Sure.
Again, I didn't get that when I watched it. These are just I've read so many articles on it the past 14, 15 years since I've seen it, and there's so many theories involved in it. I always thought it was just, a female. But.
Sure. And we're going to take a stop minute. In the room. Hello. It is Mr. Derek Carey has joined us. Glad you could make it. Didn't quite recognize the name on it, so I was like.
Yeah, so, I'm signed in under my phone, so it might have gone under something different.
It's the Puppet Master.
Pulls the strings.
Pulling the strings. Well, Derek, glad you could join us. We're just talking here about the Major character, and our impressions of her and how she was written. How she didn't feel like she quite hit all the tropes we're used to seeing, especially from the '90s for a female character. How did you feel about the Major character in this film?
The Major character in Ghost in the Shell is a very important piece of the overall point of the film. She is obviously the lead and the focal point. She is portrayed as somebody that is supposed to be in her material form, yet very asexual in her presence and in her demeanor. She is an action star. She is a philosopher. She is she goes beyond just about any lead action hero that we've ever seen before. And a lot of her character, I think, flies over people's heads because this is a Japanese film. It isn't as concerned with having to hit plot points and isn't as concerned about having to be paced in a certain way that hits beats as if like in Western film where you have to hit every 10 minutes there has to be an action scene, or if this is an exploitation film, every 10-15 minutes there has to be nudity, or there has to be violence, or there has to be this and that and this and that. This film's way more concerned with philosophy, to look at things that are going on within the world and in society, and telling them in a way, in kind of an exploitative way, that pulls you in with kind of the sci-fi elements and the action elements and some of the exploitation elements, but really it pulls you in on those things, but makes you sit and think the surrounding elements that are making the story what it is. And her character is so pivotal to everything that happens that she's a very unique presence, not only in cinema itself, but I think in especially Japanese anime. There's not many characters that are one, female and strong the way she is, but she's very unique. I mean, it's a very strange character just to try and wrap your head around, and it's a very strange film to watch once and completely understand what's going on. And her character, a lot of it is because it's very ambiguous as to what she exactly is. They don't quite ever tell you, is it male, is it female, because the body is entirely robotic. You never get any hint of what she is, other than she obviously has a female form. You never get what she is, her quote unquote ghost, what that is, because she's not sexual in any way. And I think that's kind of most of the point of her character, is that she is, because she's robotic, she's gone beyond sexuality. The puppet master is looking to replicate, and that is the new sexual intercourse. And the new sexual form is to move beyond actual physical contact, and it's mental reproduction. We move on. So her character, I mean, it's hard to just talk about her singularly without talking about all the varying elements, because this film, I think in general, is so much more than any one little bit of it. It's such a heady film, and she's kind of just like right at the center of it. She's a very non-traditional lead.
Yeah, I would completely agree, not only just because she's at the pivotal point, but there's a lot of things that go character throughout this film. Paul, how about you and the Major? Did you feel that did you feel that similar to what Derek and Cole have said about her being rather unique and kind of tough to wrap your head around of exactly what she is?
Yes, I very much agree with both of them. And I would add too, I know we should focus on the movie version of her, but a lot of people are complaining about certain aspects, certain expectations of how she should be. But if you truly look at the manga, the different movies, the various different television series that they had of her, and like the new series Arise, you can see different versions of her. She's the Major is drawn differently in each of those things and has different personalities in those things, and so it gives you this understanding that that she is a very complex character, and the Major is supposed to be something that kind of is fluid, and I very much love the fact that Derek brought up that new sexuality thing, because that is the perfect thing that the puppet master is looking for. So that's a really good point, Derek.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and the puppet master is I like how they played that with his character, because he is something that I completely opposite, I felt, to the Major character. Here we have the Major character who is all robotic, but her memories, her ghost or whatever, is from a real person. Whereas then we have the puppet master. Yes, folks, this is spoiler room. If we have to remind you, the puppet master, we come to find out, man, but an actual sentient computer program, computer program, trying to be at least not like us human, but procreate like humans so he could carry on. And I thought the puppet master was an excellent opposite of the Major. Would you say, Derek, that puppet master is the exact mirror image of the Major?
I think the puppet master is kind of the little devil on her shoulder. There's certain sequences in Ghost in the Shell in which you see the Major, what her purpose in life is. There's a sequence in which her and her partner, and please correct me, I always forget it, it's Bateau, right?
Yeah, they say Bateau or Batu. I think it's Bateau is how it is.
Yeah, where they're out
So.
on a yacht and she submerges her body in the water in order to feel weightless and completely submerge herself and get rid of physical reality into herself for a while. There's moments where she is philosophically questioning what is the nature of her reality. Right. Is it this physical form? Is it because she's seeing the puppet master manipulating other people's minds and hacking into things and taking other people's forms? Is she really tied to this body that really isn't even hers? Mm-hmm. I mean, she is seriously bits and pieces inside of this thing, and she's more of a computer program than she's anything else. So the puppet master, to those questions that she has, because obviously he's hacked into her and he's hacked into everybody else, so he is manipulating her in specific ways to make her question these things, so that maybe she will completely go with him and just become this AI sentient program that just propagates itself through the world. So the puppet master is parts of her. Mm-hmm. I really have always thought it was like, you know, the little devil that sits on her shoulder trying to push her away from this really physical material world. It really is nothing more than a program at that point.
And Paul, how about you with Puppet Master? How'd you feel about it? Would you say that agree with Derek there about how he's manipulating the Major in many ways?
I would like to think that he wasn't. I would love to think that it was her choice, but I can very much agree with Derek that is a very good possibility. Mm-hmm. Very much a possibility. I would like to add the one scene of her coming out of the water like that. It mirrors the scene of the body, the full prosthetic body that I believe is actually built for the puppet master, doing the same thing at the beginning of the film. She does the almost the same exact thing. That's a perfect mirror. A wonderful, wonderful tie-in.
Yeah, it did tie in well. I saw a lot of parallels imagery we do get throughout this film, and especially when it gets to the Puppet Master. How about you, Cole, and the Puppet Master?
I don't know, man. From my impression, and I've only seen the film twice, I kind of agree with everything the Puppet Master has to say, which is that once something is life, it is life, and it deserves respect. I mean, again, not to hark back on this, but there's this great scene in the Matrix Revolutions where Neo meets these programs that they're trying to get their child out. And he's like, well, how can you love your child? She's just a program, right? And I'm not going to go into it here, but there's a big, long discussion about what is love and how can you feel love, and basically everything can feel love. And that hits home with me. It hits home with me quite deeply, and I agree with it. And I think it also ties into the fact that when she's reborn, she is a kid. I think we can't, reborn in quotes. I don't think we should overlook that. The body he buys, Batu buys on the black market is a child's body. I think that's important. I don't think there is any indication of a sinister ending when this young body goes and looks over the city. I think it's born anew, and hopefully born anew with the sense that all life deserves respect. Mm-hmm. That was my own personal impression. I'm not a Ghost in the Shell expert, but that's what I took from it.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that because for folks that don't know, there is a final battle, obviously, as you would imagine that there is with a film like this. And actually, Major gets seriously mucked up and gets connected to the Puppet Master. And there's a kind of an interesting, not anticlimactic, but a rather more subtle battle a more subtle battle between the two, and then to repair her body, Batu puts her in this kid's body, and she's hardly even fazed by it. She's just like, oh, okay, this is how it is now.
Well, that's because the body it never mattered to her. I mean,
right.
Like even in the beginning, obviously the reason why she disrobes herself and attacks people nude is because the body has thermo-optic camouflage embedded in it, so she can become invisible. It didn't matter. See, that's kind of like an important point, that sexuality in her body didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It only became naked in order to become visible.
Right.
So it just like the point that at the end where she becomes a child and becomes reborn again, it kind of also shows that, what, it didn't matter that she was a woman, didn't matter if she was a man, didn't matter if she was a child. What mattered was life, and that that program, no matter what the quote unquote the ghost was her personality, was her life, was her soul, if you want to use terms such as soul. That's who she was, and no matter what the physical form was involved with it, she was alive.
Right, and they play at the philosophical discussions that they have is her identity, who she really is, and even a soul. Does she have one? Do the robots have? Folks have one. There's a lot of that, as Derek said, heady stuff going on in this film with it. And so, yeah, you're right. It didn't really matter to her what body she was in. Even at the end when she got totally destroyed, she was like, nope, still hook me up to the puppet master. And Batu's like, you got no limbs. And she's like, I don't care, hook me up, let's get this done. The body to her was insignificant. It felt
it always was. I mean, that one sequence in which she was submerging herself, she pretty much said as much, because Batu says to her, well, aren't you thousands or millions of dollars of equipment possibly could sink to the bottom of the ocean? She goes, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me.
No, it and I think that was also part of her, how she was able to do some of the more crazy fights or just throw herself into it. Paul, would you say that kind of not make her reckless, but just kind of not worry about her physical form, so that made her a little bit more of the perfect weapon, because she just go into the battle, into the fray, and not really worry what happened to her?
I know that would make me a much more better fighter. So yeah, if I didn't have to worry about getting injured, or to the point where I think I would fight much better. I think I would be much more courageous. I would take more chances, because it's a matter of risk versus reward. And in her case, the risk wasn't that high if there was bodily damage, because for one, the cybered up augmentations that they have will help them heal faster and do a lot of things that a normal person couldn't do. So they're able to, and imagine living in a body like that all the time and not have to worry about it. You just sort of get accustomed to it. You're just used to it. And I think that this movie did a really good job of not drawing too much attention to that idea, but still kind of covering it.
Yeah, and we mentioned Batu, her loyal partner, and what I loved about it is at no point, like I said, and maybe it's partly because he was cyborg or whatnot, so we're mostly cybernetics, so he didn't quite have the human emotions, but at no point do they even play remotely at a romantical feel. You get the feel like he's loyal. Cole, wouldn't you say with Batu that he's just kind of just her loyal partner, but they never really play at anything else where you could easily see where they would have, try to lean towards that?
Lean towards what?
Romance.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. I mean, although There are a couple glimpses, like where she's undressing and he intentionally looks away.
Right.
So you could say that they aren't leaning towards romance, but instead he's intentionally neglecting it.
Right.
I do think that in some way he was in love with her. It may not be sexual, but I do think the connection was there, and the philosophy runs so deep it makes you question everything. What is love? What is sexuality? What is attraction? And you could make the argument for pretty much anything with Ghost in the Shell. But with his connection towards her, I mean, obviously it's not being, in love, or he wouldn't have put her in the body of a young girl at the end there. At least, let's fucking hope not. But I don't know what to disagree with or disagree with in terms of his relationship with her. Other than that, he's constantly questioning what her relationship with reality, with the company is.
Mm-hmm.
And it is almost to the point where you feel like he's going to become a villain at some point. And he doesn't. He's really on the edge there. What way is this guy going to turn?
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of, I think their most important scene together, which Derek and Paul commented so brilliantly on, is when she's taking the deep sea dive,
right?
Which I never saw as a proof of invincibility or fearlessness. I saw as her trying to reach some sense of spirituality beyond this world that was so robotic and just sort of squared off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I saw that as her just trying to free herself in any way, like the scene where she rises to the top and there's these little gurgles of water on her goggles. Mm-hmm. She's trying to reach whatever spirituality that she can. And he is just trying to figure that out. He's like, what is that? And there's a couple moments in the film where he's like, what is that? What is that? Your inner muse? I forget the terminology they use, but mm-hmm. he's constantly questioning, what is this inspiration you have? And it's her trying to find her soul. So I think he's attracted to that. It may not be sexually, it may be, but he's definitely drawn to it. And this character, this Batu guy, will always, be in love with her. Being in love, whatever way you want to categorize it. Mm-hmm. He'll be there for her,
What about you, Paul? Would you say that it might, or is it loyalty with Batu, or is it just curiosity because he's trying to figure her out?
I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. I do, like Cole said, believe that there is a little bit of feelings that he has. He does look away when she's removing her wetsuit. But also, if you notice at the end scene when there's two instances. One where he sets out his arm and he protects her and her only, not the puppet master's head, her head. And also, if you notice that her body was covered with his coat, not the puppet master's. So I thought he did have some feelings in that aspect for her. But it also might be just more of an extended kind of maybe like a brother sister type of emotional connection, which is again maybe has some credence because he got the little girl body, even though that was the only thing he had available on the black market, which is kind of scary if you think about it, because that means that the black market has these little children robots. So it must be popular in the 2029. So
it is Japan we're talking about.
It is a different culture.
To give you two kind of outside things that I did some research on this character, and two things that I learned about him, which was interesting, is one, he actually is kind of the proxy of the director of the film. So a lot of the questions he's asking are actual questions from the director himself, kind of, to the world and to the audience and to that world in general. And the other thing is more of an outside of the movie thing, but in different iterations of this character, one of them, he actually gets basically a workout. He spends all of his extra money getting a workout set, even though he's fully augmented. He lifts weights because that's like the Major did with the whole underwater thing. It gives him a sense of what it's like to be what it was, back when he was not so cybered up. Which also I think is why he has a connection to the Major, is that of all the people in Section 9, I believe that both of them have as a level of augmentation cybernetic wise, they both have a very similar levels. And I think that those two characters can relate to each other more than any of the other characters do. And I think that's what gives them a special connection. So.
Right, they're the most cyborg, so they kind of have that connection immediately already, and they would kind of gravitate towards one another. So I could see that, yeah, definitely, and it's interesting with the Batu character lifting weights to try to stay human, because you can kind of see his character doing that if he wasn't quite so cybernetically enhanced. How about you, Derek? Do you think there's some romantical feelings here? What do you think Batu feels for the Major?
I always took their relationship as, I think you need to remember that at its core, Ghost in the Shell is a police procedural.
Yeah.
And I always took their characters as the two partner characters.
Mm-hmm.
In most traditional media that we've grown accustomed to in police procedural type films and media, those two, if you're a partner to each other, there's such an intense loyalty that you're almost family.
Right.
And I never took their relationship as romantic in any way. I took it as mutually respected, and that they were loyal to the death with each other. And of course, and Cole had made reference to, how he turned away when she was changing and all this stuff. I think that was because, he doesn't want to see her in that way.
Right.
He cares for her, obviously, deeply, and that he will sacrifice himself for her. And I think there was a great point that was brought up. I think Cole might have brought it up, where and we'll keep going back to the diving scene, because I think the diving scene is such an important piece of this film.
Important.
It really up what the overall concept of the film, where it's getting at. It's a very spiritual section of the film, and what she's doing is basically akin to meditation. It's a very Buddhist principle. She's trying to eliminate all external stimuli and only listen to herself. And Batu is attracted to that because everything and everyone in this world are constantly plugged into everything else. So the beginning of this film literally starts with just like anarchy. It's just constant, it's talking, and it's digital noise and stuff going on all the time to sift through this in the beginning of the film. And there's that one scene, the diving, where she completely blocks everything out. Entire body by being fully submerged in this water. And he also questions that. But at the same time, he is the straight man of this film. He is that police captain that lives and breathes his job, and he's trying to understand this person that he respects and cares for so much in the journey she's going on. And I think he starts to slightly question himself as well. So I never took it as a romantic thing, because I really think this movie in the director, if you listen to him, he also states this. He wants to examine movie at a point in life where we've been so attached to technology that we move beyond sexuality, because we move beyond the physical form.
Mm-hmm.
We now are dealing with mental processes, and because we project ourselves as something else online, we project ourselves as something else when we create personas. And these programs, in essence, are personas.
Sure.
They're no longer the concept of what is personality. It's all jumbled in this world. So I don't believe. I think there are images of sexuality in this film, but the point of the film is to push you past those, because sexuality no longer matters in this world.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. With that is it really doesn't matter. I mean, there's some frankness with the people. Well, especially with the major character getting naked, but I mean, but no one really blinks an eye at anything. It's like they're so jacked in to the network that it's they've kind of are losing that regular physical sexuality and going to some kind of different level, which is something that watching this film, I'm like, this is from '95, but there's a lot of things in this film that you could actually see happening, which I think is interesting. One, you've got the corporations pretty much running countries, more or less. And then, you've had revolutions and such, but the way everyone is tied to the network, I mean, I'm watching this going, wow, we're just like a step away from that with our smartphones, aren't we, Paul?
Yes, definitely we are very, very close to getting to that point. And I honestly, I personally don't mind doing that. I wouldn't mind being somewhat connected to an internet like that. I'm more afraid of when the first time I saw them extend out their fingers, and that became like where their bodies became no longer stylized but more function driven.
Mm-hmm.
That scares me more than having to be connected to an interconnected web like that. It's the whole idea that your body is no longer what it is. It becomes just a functional tool, an extension of your ghost, is more scarier to me than anything.
Right. It makes you wonder what people are, because you get kind of the impression with the philosophy going on too, with the ghosts in the shell, if you will, the shell of the cybernetic, or almost like people are living a lot longer than they're expected to. And like you said, the bodies become more functional. And you could almost see that happening today. Derek, do you think this film is a little bit prophetic in some things?
Oh, it absolutely is. It 100% is. I mean, there are cybernetic people walking around today.
Right.
And we're not talking about cybernetic in the science fiction sort of way. We're talking about people that walk around with prosthetic limbs and almost robotic limbs at this point. People that walk around with pieces in their body that are mechanical, that allow them to breathe, to be able to just sustain life. Their body would have allowed them to do. So at some point in the future, technology will get to a point where we will outlast our physical form, and we will figure out that I'm immortal. There will be that point. I mean, there will be that point where we are so jacked in with, and we get to a point where technology is so far ahead of us that this may not be 100% the reality, but these are questions we need to start asking. Is how far do we really want to go down this rabbit hole? I think that's a lot of what good speculative science fiction makes you do, and why it's so funny that a lot of the concepts that we science fiction films of the 70s and the 80s, from like Harlan Ellison to like the Terminators to like all this stuff, why this stuff is now starting to become reality. We start like slowly walking that line and not questioning these things, this becomes more real.
Right.
These kind of things will become more real. That's why good science fiction films should really push you into a scenario that's so overblown that makes you question, well, is this really a good thing? Is this really a good thing to constantly be going? I mean, we're to the point where we're finally starting to have conversations now in the world about a post-work humanity,
Mm-hmm.
about a time in which humans will no longer work. And what will that be like?
Right.
So, I mean, this film is extremely prophetic about, and that's why it's so important, and that's why I don't want to get like into talking about the film that's going to be coming out, because obviously none of us have seen it. But from what we see is that a lot of the philosophy looks like it's being stripped away, and if that's the case, it's going to be so heartbreaking to see, because I think that's what makes I almost said hole in the wall, Ghost in the Shell. I'm sorry, please edit that out. It's what makes Ghost in the Shell such an insanely important film. When I first saw this in 1995, it didn't just blow me away, it changed me. I've watched this movie so many times. I've owned it every single time it comes out. I've seen the sequel, not a huge fan of it, and I've seen some of the other iterations of it, and they just don't do it for me. This film is such an important film for people that want to question what is reality and what is our role with technology. I think it is so prophetic, and I think that's a great question, because I really do think we need to have movies like this in order to question what we're doing, not only as a society, but where we're pushing ourselves.
Yeah, I completely agree. Whenever I see films like this, and you see what's happening today in real life, the line, not from Ghost in the Shell, it's from Jurassic Park, but it kind of fits, is your scientists were so busy seeing if they could do something, they never asked if they should. And this film kind of on, looking at that question of how far in technology do we really want to push it before you transcend or lose humanity. And every day I think we're getting closer to it. And so, yeah, it's definitely, it surprised me how prophetic this film was. Cole, would you agree that this film was prophetic?
Yeah, I mean, what Derek said so beautifully, and obviously he's seen this film far more than I have, but I would like just reiterate what he's talking about. It is a singularity, a moment in humanity. This is a scientific term, singularity, where something so big happens that it changes things so fast that human consciousness can't even relate to it. A black hole is one. Time travel would be another. AI is the only current example we have of it. Something that would happen so fast, a singularity, to where everything would change to the point where everybody living wouldn't have a chance to catch up. And that's what AI is. And I fully agree with what Derek is saying, which is that it's on the horizon. It's here. And actually, Mark, in your review for what's the Johnny Depp film?
Transcendence.
Yes, you mentioned this. Haven't you people seen Terminator 2? I mean, literally, we're at that point where people are experimenting with nanotechnology. This isn't just a Jason X theory anymore. I mean, this is literally happening, and I think Ghost in the Shell really brings that about. The fact that it was made in 1995 kind of blows me away. I didn't see it till 2000, 2001, but wow, man. What an amazing piece of work. Really.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, especially, the day and age we live in now and revisiting it really, I was like, wow, this film is a bit eerie with what a lot of the subjects that they're talking about, and it does require multiple viewings, I think, to catch everything. And so now we're going to just roll down the aisle, see if any of my guests here have something that they'd like to talk with the group about that we might not have touched on already. So, Paul, do you have a question or topic we may not have touched on already?
I would like to dive more into that simulated experience type of philosophy. The idea that when somebody's ghost has been hacked, the puppet master was able to implant memories and made you think that you were someone that you weren't. I have a big fear of Alzheimer's in the future for myself, and so this is a big concept to me, and I just want to know what the rest of the group feels about that whole idea of are you your memories? Could you have false memories of a particular event and just believe it's so real that it becomes a part of you? That's a frightening thing for me, and I just want to know what the rest of you guys think about that.
Oh, sure. Cole, why don't you go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I've dealt with dementia. I guess I'll speak to Paul directly. I've dealt with dementia in my family. And in fact, I made a movie about it, Angels and Goblins, which, I'll probably let people see a few years down the road. But I think it's Alzheimer's is tricky because, yeah, man, it's a horrifying concept that you can lose yourself, that your memories are the summation of you, and that as the memories trickle away, you lose who you are. On the same hand, I think the belief in a soul is probably a different concept. And without saying what I believe in, I think that, as I say, Dark City dealt with this. I said this earlier in the show. These weird alien, hell-raising looking motherfuckers go around putting different memories in everybody's heads, seeing if they'll change the personality eventually. And what they realize is that they can't. So I'd like to believe that in my core, that when the human body shuts down, regardless of what comes later, who you were, who you were at your core remains intact. In terms of Alzheimer's, Paul, that's a huge fear of mine as well. And there's no answer to that till they find a cure, man. Shit. I'm sorry, that's a hopeless answer, but I gotta be honest, it freaks me out as well. So.
And Derek, how about you? This concept of are some of our memories or something else that is touched on here in Ghost of the Shell?
Well, I want to go at it from a different place. I'm not going to get religious, and I'm not going to get philosophical about this. Let's take this from a very practical place. This is something, as I kind of discussed before. These concepts are becoming more and more reality. Let's take, for example, we are now getting to a point where our vehicles are going to be automated. We are no longer going to be driving these vehicles. There are going to be people that are hacking into self-automated vehicles and stealing them or rerouting them and making them do whatever they want them to do. Car theft is on the rise since we've gone into this world where cars are automated. What's to make you think once we get to a point where our bodies and our minds also become augmented, that this won't be the reality? And that kind of, it absolutely is a metaphor for what we're talking about here with be it dementia or schizophrenia or any cognitive disease, that we kind of always say that it's something outside of us that's taking ourselves away, that it's a disease that's taking ourselves away, or that it's or we like a schizophrenic that claims that it's somebody like a demon or some voice that is making them do these things that aren't necessarily of their own volition. We always want to try and attribute these things to some external source. I am an atheist. I do not believe in an afterlife. I do not believe in while I would say, quote unquote, I'm a spiritual person, I don't believe in metaphysics, which is anything that's outside of my body. So when it comes to things like this, eventually all of us will go away. And I think sometimes some of that, like Alzheimer's or any other cognitive disease that may come about, is part of the breakdown of the body. And eventually we will all go away. So I don't know where I'm really going with any of this, but
it's okay.
I really think that a lot of the stuff that they're discussing in this movie is that idea that we have to come to terms with at some point. Pieces of ourselves are going to be taken away from us, and it's not necessarily it's kind of the natural order of things. That's just how things happen. And to tie back to what I was talking about before, as we're moving forward technologically, people and other things are going to start taking things away from us, and there's nothing we're going to be able to do about it. So honestly, I've always thought that there are so many different levels in this movie you could sit and take any of these ideas. And I think there's a great question, because it's not just a literal interpretation of somebody going in and what is your memory, or who are you, or whatever. You can't just surmise that into one thing. There's so many external things that go into who you are, and everybody's idea of who you are is different. So I don't know. That's not something you can necessarily. That's a question in a topic you could go on forever about. You could have shows about what is the nature of reality. What is the nature of who you are? Who are you? What makes you you? Is it the legacy of what you leave behind? Is it your personality? Is it the actions that you lead? Is it a spirit? Are you something that lives on in the afterlife? I don't know. I couldn't tell you any of that stuff. But
and you're right. Ghost in the Shell, it does touch on that subject, but it doesn't actually give you a real answer either with it. I think it leaves that interpretation for you to.
Yeah,
to
good
discuss.
philosophy should give you the answer. It should give you a question that makes you discuss and try and figure out what that is.
And I think that's where Bato comes in quite a bit. Is he's kind of not only I'm glad Paul found that out, that it's the voice of the questions the audience is asking. What they're asking while they're watching the film. So I would say it is frightening to think about losing yourself, but then you got to question, well, what does that exactly mean? What is that self? And it is scary to think that if we did go to a completely cybernetic body, what would stop someone from taking control of it? And if they implanted memories, would we even, if you make a memory realistic enough, how would you even know, that you've changed? It asks a lot of questions, and you're right. Good philosophy doesn't give you the answers. It's supposed to just make you look things, I think, and approach things differently. And you may never get a full, complete answer, but I don't think we're supposed to. You're supposed to be constantly asking questions to learn, because that's the only way you can learn. And this film asks a lot of questions. And so, yeah, excellent question on there, Paul. And Cole, how about you? Did you have a topic or something that you wanted to bring up for the group to discuss?
Oh shit! I'm supposed to follow up Paul's question. Man, that was a good question.
Follow up Paul's question about what is self, Go ahead, Cole.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
Follow up Paul's question. Yeah, man. And Derek's answer, man, that's hard. No, I can't. Do I have anything? I don't. I was honestly going to ask the obvious question, which is, how do you feel about this fucking trailer that we've all seen a million fucking times? Sorry about all the bleeps you guys are going to have to put in later.
I don't put any bleeps. I put in no bleeps.
Oh, awesome.
No, we
awesome.
got no.
Yeah, that was my question. I mean,
I think it's a legitimate question. I think we should discuss it, honestly.
Oh, I planned on it. I'm glad you brought it up, Cole, because I was going to bring it up. No, so that is a legitimate question. So you're asking, how do we feel about what we saw in the trailer?
Yes. I mean, I saw 4 movies last month, and that trailer was attached to each of them. So I'm kind of, just curious.
We'll start with Paul. Paul, how do you feel about the trailers and what you've learned and seen about this live action? Do you think it'll be from the impression we get now? Fully, we don't know for sure. We haven't seen it, and we're not going to completely shit on it like some people out there just because of from what it looks. But just your impressions initially from the trailer. Do you think it's more action oriented, or do you think they're going to try to hold more to the source material?
I think they're going to try to keep some of the elements, but I think they are going to change it. That's my fear, that they'll change it. It'll lose some of its heart. But I was very happy to see in the trailer at least 3 of the scenes, which I consider very iconic to the anime, at least. And I was happy to see those scenes represented. I think they needed those in the trailer to convince people like me to go watch it.
Derek, being the devout fan that you are, your initial impressions and how you feel, at least with what you've seen, about any hesitations, any feelings you have so far.
After when we first saw that footage, when Super Bowl happened, when they finally started leaking footage and they started releasing trailers, everything I saw made me jacked. I'm like, wow, this looks fucking awesome. Visually, it is so dynamic. It looks like $1,000,000. Looks like a lot of care was put into the photography, a lot of symmetry going on, a lot of really beautiful colors, a lot of contrast. It just looks so amazing, and obviously they were very purposeful with the images they showed, because not only were they showing you new things, they were literally showing you frame perfect images from the anime. I mean, there are certain shots in those trailers that are like directly from the anime, and I think they were intentional why they did that. Now, I've also seen a number of films in the last few months, and I've seen some of these new, because there's been like 2 other trailers that they've released, and the last one they released had more of the story. And just my impression from the trailer, I was very disheartened by the last trailer, because it felt like that they were taking the overall idea and simplifying it into a easily digestible kind of like revenge yarn, which to me has nothing to do with what Ghost in the Shell is. Now, it may be totally different. Okay, I'm also going to break kayfabe here. And I'm going to say I did watch the 5-minute intro clip that they released this week. Did any of you guys see that?
I haven't watched it.
I haven't watched it, man.
It's the first 5 minutes, and it is that first scene of the Major on the roof, and she tears off her clothes and goes into thermoptic camouflage and busts into the scene. Just from that scene that now I've watched, it is different in the way that it is no longer a diplomatic scene of a bunch of people in the government trying to get together to talk about government things. it is a bunch of people eating at a dining table, like almost like a very informal meeting of delegates, and it's a very like there's geishas around and all this stuff.
Oh, really?
And she goes, well, they're robot geishas, and she drops down, and it's very similar. There's still a lot of shots that have been repurposed from different things. They've changed it enough to where it felt the same, but it also felt a little more streamlined. And I actually kind of liked that scene, but it was the first instance where I didn't like Scarlett Johansson's character.
Oh no.
Where it's just like, we'll see. I really don't want to pass too much judgment, and because I'm definitely going to see it. I mean, I won't get to see it until Sunday night, but I'm going to go see it this weekend. I can't wait to see it. It's, as I said before, I absolutely love Ghost in the Shell, so I'm just like so jacked to see it. But the last couple things have really kind of turned me off.
Yeah, and from what I've seen too, because I didn't remember much of the movie, I hadn't watched it much. So what I saw, I was like, okay, it looks like visually, at least the production design, it seemed like they were really trying to capture that world and some of those iconic shots. And I agree. Watching it more, though, it does seem like the story will be changed, and they may not get as philosophical and heady. What's more interesting is the fact at least from the trailer, it almost feels like it's going to be a little bit more action orientated, for one, and two, I don't know if they're combining from maybe the series and maybe a couple of other storylines as well, or if this is an original take on the movie, because I'm not familiar enough with it, but it almost felt like they're going on a different angle, like you said, Derek, with the revenge trip. So, it could be really interesting. It'll be interesting if they do go more action, though, because that's one thing I just want to mention is my observation with this film is, as much as it's anime, as much as we're dealing with cyborgs and everything, there's actually not a huge amount of action pieces in this film.
No, there's not. There's not, man.
I mean, even in that opening scene you're talking about in the original animated film, you think, oh, we're going to get a beat down, shoot them out. The guys whip out the cool guns from the briefcases, and the guy's like, no. They handle. Oh, okay. Whereas it does seem like, from what we've seen, there's going to be more action in the live action. I plan on going to see it too, though. I am curious on their approach and everything, and it'll be interesting to see. And I'm sure people will have opinions once it comes out.
Oh, you can rest assured of that.
One of the things that I found out in researching for this episode that we're talking about today is that the director of the anime went out and got his animation team and had them try out real guns on real surfaces because he wanted to capture that realism in the film. So what you're seeing on there is what bullets would do reacting to certain types of material. And you notice that when they were shooting up the stone, there wasn't all that Hollywood flashiness. It just looked like, holes in the wall, and that's because they went off and they fired guns, and they fired them into wood, they fired it into metal, and they wanted to see how guns would react. And I thought that was just to add that level of commitment to a film, especially an animated film, is amazing.
But I don't know if they put that much commitment in the live action version, though.
Oh, probably not. You're gonna see like all sorts of gun flares and explosions, I'm sure.
And Paul, are you looking forward to the live action or curious about it?
I've already got my tickets. So yeah.
Guess that answers that. So, and Derek, how about you? Do you have a topic real quick or something more that you want to touch on, or do we cover it tonight?
Yeah, I got a quick one. I don't know. I bet I'm sure Paul probably has seen it, but there was a special edition version of Ghost in the Shell that came out that was called Ghost in the Shell 2.0. Mm-hmm. Has anybody seen this? And if they had, what did you think of the differences because there was editorial differences, but there was also because it was made in, I believe, 2001. Was it 2007?
I thought I read 2007, but maybe it was 2001.
It was much later.
Right.
It was made in, there was a lot more CGI elements. They completely changed that iconic credit sequence in the beginning of her, being constructed and all that stuff. So I was curious as to what people's opinions were on that, if they had seen that.
I did not get a chance to see that, but Paul, did you get a chance to see the Ghost in the Shell 2.0?
I did, actually. The sound is much better, and I think there's also some color differences, if I can remember right.
Mm-hmm.
I think like in the original, like they showed much more yellowish and or was it green, and then they did with gold. Those subtle changes, but I think the sound overall was the best improvement of 2.0. Otherwise, just watch the original and be happy with the original, because the original is almost so perfect.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I felt that the changes they had made with the CG and all that stuff was really jarring.
Yeah,
because it was so different than the original animation that I didn't like it. I mean, some of it was cool, but it just was really jarring.
And Cole, did you see Ghost in the Shell 2.0?
Oh fuck, CG. I'm sorry. No, I haven't seen it. I have not seen it. I am sorry. I read about it shortly before I went online because obviously we rewatch it about 4 p.m. this afternoon and sent you a message, Mark, and just made sure I was rewatching the right one. So I know about it. I know they improved the audio and added some extra shit. I'm not interested. I mean, if you guys had said go back and watch it, I would have. But the consensus here is not to. So it's doubtful I'll check it out. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't get a chance to check it out either. I did see an article though that compared the two, and it was 2008 that it came out in.
Oh, really?
Wow. But they went with a completely different color palette. Apparently, they made everything more browns and tan versus the blues and greens that you get in the original. Yeah, and I saw too the shots that they did where they redid some of the CGI in that, and I haven't seen it yet, so I can't pass true judgment, but I don't always care when they do stuff like that, because as Derek says, it's usually very notable. I'm looking at you, George Lucas, in the special editions. It's usually very noticeable if they try to redo something like that and insert it, because either it's going to look too sharp versus the rest of the film, or it's just going to be too, the contrast is going to be too different.
I think a big thing, Mark, is why is it being done?
Right.
Like, is this making it better? And I have to say resoundingly no.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are retaking, like, let's just talk about that opening credit sequence of this film. It is so amazingly rendered. Like, it's such beautiful animation, combined with that score that is just, it's otherworldly. The singing and the music, and to take those images that are just so striking and replace them with really kind of bloomy gold abstract images of I think a lot of it was changed because I think the director wanted to downplay the sexuality, which was that opening credit sequence was essentially a naked girl almost the entire time. And I know the director, I had read, wanted to not only do this version to use updated technology to beef the film up a little bit, but to also focus some of the message. And that was something that I had read from the new director of the new film, the live action film, was that the reason why there's some things that are going to be changed with it is because he said, one, very Japanese film.
Yeah.
And that means that it's in its pace, and it's in the way that it sees the world. And I think 2.0 at the original film and said, okay, well, maybe this was a little too heady. And maybe this was, maybe we exploited certain elements like the female form more than was necessary. And it's unfortunate. I personally wouldn't even bother watching it, to be honest. The original is so perfect and so amazing that I'm one of those crotchety old dudes. It's like, why tinker with something that's already perfect?
Right.
Well, yeah, and plus people have paid for the original version. That's my problem with retinkering with art is you've paid for it. Your audience is a lot of these people who your fan base aren't rich, and they spend their money to see this stuff. And then you go back and say, well, no, we meant to make it better. And that version you have on your shelf, that isn't right. That isn't what we wanted to do. I'm sorry, but that's not fair, man. You gotta give your audience the benefit of the doubt that they aren't all, the richest people in the world, and that when they buy your film, when they purchase it, or anything else, like in Lucas's case, when his team wins an Oscar, and then he completely revamps that sequence that won the Oscar, what does that mean? That means a hell of a lot. To me personally, I would never defile my cast or my actors that way. I would always hope to show their best shit and never turn my back on it. And I think, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a rant, but I think it's really lame. Unless it's a specific circumstance, I think it's really lame to go back in and say, I'm going to erase a bunch of what we did and put this shit in now because it was my original vision. Because now it's popular. Because now I have the funding to do it. That's lame.
Well, I think it goes with what Derek was saying, them trying to do, what they wanted to do versus, it changed the message, not quite happy with the original product. But Derek's a filmmaker and just the other, and Cole, you made films. And I've talked to a number of others who said at some point in your film and your project, you just kind of have to take a step back and go, okay, I'm done. Because otherwise,
I'm done. Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll just keep tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it, and it'll be completely different, and it might not be as great as what you had when you first said, yes, I'm finished.
Well, I also think sometimes, though, with these kind of movies, and I'm sure, a lot of what George Lucas did was because he was trying to create hype for the prequels that were coming out, he's trying to, so what better way to do that than to put out new versions that he really didn't have to do anything with of the originals, and just to have a bunch of other people sit and slop a bunch of bullshit on it. And I'm sure that this Ghost in the Shell 2.0 was kind of the same thing, where the studio was kind of like, hey, maybe, because I don't remember what time did Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex come out.
I'm not sure. I remember hearing talk about it. I didn't follow it enough to.
Yeah, I have a feeling it was somewhere around. Maybe it could have been a little earlier than that. I don't quite remember what the time was, but I know Innocence came out, which is part 2, in 2004. So maybe there was something where they were trying to create more hype for something, and they're just like, okay, well, why don't we kind of repackage and resell Ghost in the Shell, because it's a sure commodity. Everyone loves it. So why not? I mean, sure, it's around the same time that Lucas was doing all the same, no, that was in 99, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, all of that is awesome, but then he needs to make the original versions commercially available.
Wow.
He can do whatever the fuck he wants. That's fine, but give us the original versions, and he won't. Unless you own the original VHS copies, you're screwed. Or the Laserdiscs, which luckily have been passed on to me. But
that whole series is a whole nother discussion.
I'm sorry, Mark. I apologize.
So Standalone Complex, according to a wiki, says the original run was 2002 to 2003.
Okay.
And then the second version of it, the second GIG, that was 2004 to 2005.
Okay, so it's curious. I wonder why they decided to go back to the well.
Yeah, they should have did what. Oops, sorry.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I'm not sure either why they would have, because that would have been before this came out, or was it? Well, yeah, it wouldn't even been an anniversary, so who not sure why the timing would be of why they did 2.0 at that time. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Paul. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say if they were going to redo it, they should have done what they did with Appleseed, which was just to redo the whole thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, just do a whole new film instead of trying to edit into original footage. So, yeah. But we're going to wrap it up here tonight. I want to thank my panel for joining us on this discussion. Hope you got a lot out of it, getting interested for the live action. But before you see that, check out this one. At least that's my opinion on it. We'll go down real quick and just get people's quick final thought, and then where they can find you at as well. So quick final thought on Ghost in the Shell, and then where they can find you at.
I love Ghost in the Shell. I think it's an amazing piece of art, and it sticks with me. It's always stuck with me. I haven't watched it since about 2002 or 2001, and I think it's fantastic. And I say seek it out if you haven't seen it. The majority of our listeners probably have, but I just, it's one of those things that is so influential to so many things that I already love. It's just set the standard for a lot of films that came after. So seek it out. It's on Hulu right now for those of you who have Hulu. But my stuff is on Facebook, Shadows and Lovers. We've got 2 movies coming out on digital release this year, The Last Great Horror Movie and Rise. Also, if you want to check out my cheesy digital art, check out Horror on Facebook. And also be sure to follow Derek, Mark, and Paul's stuff. These guys set the standard. They do phenomenal work and phenomenal podcasts, and they're definitely worth following. I'm just a filmmaker. These guys, they've got their tentacles out, and they do a lot of great stuff. So
we're talking about a Japanese film. Don't bring up tentacles, please.
Mark, what was that one we talked about way back on ARZ about the night with the Japanese, or what was that?
Evening with the Japanese. That's a whole different live action. Oh God, that movie! Oh, you had to bring that up. Now
then all of a sudden popped into my mind.
Oh God, no! Between that and yes, tentacle movies I've seen. Yeah, I've seen things that you just cannot unsee. Derek, you're just quick final thought with Ghost in the Shell, and you.
I kind of already let the cat out of the bag. This is literally probably in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. When I first saw it, I didn't just like it. It changed me as a film viewer. I always thought that this was a movie that was important for people to see, even though I quite realized that it is not for everyone. Its pace and its density is done in such a way that it assures that only the right people are really going to grasp onto that. And that's not to say that people are stupid, but they are. And there's a lot going on in this film that it's not going to be for everyone. But if you like really heady philosophical films, you like films that stick with you, you like films that don't insult your intelligence, and you like beautiful films, and you don't mind cartoons, I think that's a big hurdle. Mm-hmm. And why a lot of people probably haven't seen this is because I think a lot of people don't take cartoons seriously, and they should, because it's just as viable of an art form as anything else. And Ghost in the Shell is not only one of the best sci-fi films ever made, I think it's literally one of the best films ever made, period. So I would say you have to go see this. This is essential, especially if they're, your listeners are a fan of anything you ever talk about, Mark. You've been talking about adult animation for a few years now. This 100% should be in everybody's collection, or at least should be on their watch list. You need to see this film. So, and besides that, you can catch me on my podcast where I talk about filthy movies that most people wouldn't admit that they watch. My podcast is Astro Radio Z. You can find it on YouTube, on iTunes, on TuneIn, on Stitcher, on Google Music, Google Play, whatever. You can find it wherever you find podcasts. And also, I moonlight sometimes as a filmmaker myself. You can catch my horror anthology with a bunch of other weirdo Wisconsin horror filmmakers called Hole in the Wall on Amazon Prime right now. Or you could, if you want a DVD copy, you could find it at rabbitchildfilmstoremv.com. And also coming out hopefully sometime this year, I've been working on Manos Returns, so hopefully we'll get that to you guys soon. I'm very excited for people to finally see this, the sequel to Manos Hands of Fate that everyone's been clamoring for. So go out, support that. Go like the Facebook page and let Tanya, the director, Tanya Atomic, know how amazing she is that she was able to pull this off. So that's it.
Cool. And Paul, sir, your final thought with Ghost in the Shell and where they can find you at.
Hey, my final thought is that anime is not just hentai and Pokemon. So, yes, there's definitely very adult oriented, but that are not dirty and sexual films out there. There are movies that make you think, and in that aspect, it is truly art. You can actually look at animation as an art form, like it should be, and you have these deep concepts. And Ghost in the Shell is definitely one of those type of films. So go out and watch it. Actually, both versions are on Hulu, the 2.0 and the regular version, so you can watch those. And where to find me is you can find me at my normal blog page at forsakenfilmreviews.wordpress.com. I also have a Forsaken Film Review podcast, as well as Film Jerks on the Astro Radio Z network. And you can also find out about the Northeast Wisconsin Horror Film Festival at newhorrorfest.com.
Fantastic. Make sure you check out all those things. We hope we wet your whistle for this animated version. Definitely, I agree with everything said here. It should be on your must-watch list. I don't watch it often, but every time I do, I get something different out of it. And I think you will too. It's one of those films that is essential. Anime films aren't just tentacle porn and weird things and outrageous action. There's a lot of great stuff out there, which is kind of why I wanted to do these mature animated months. We've done 2 of them so far. We may do another one if I can gather some ones up that I think are maybe of interest. But animated films, it's not only an art form, it is something that can be for both adults and not just kids. It can be heady. There can be a lot of things, and in fact, you have even more stuff to trigger the adult imagination, and in many ways, and get the brain thinking. It's not just meant. We'll leave that to Michael Bay and his Transformers films. So, and with that, we are going to say goodnight, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please head over to our new Facebook page. That's facebook.com/groups/SMPRD. That's where you can actually interact with us. I made a group specifically for the stuff we work on, and you have a little more input. You can get better updates, and just, give what you might want to hear on the spoiler room. So we're going to close it up tonight, and now say goodnight, gentlemen.
Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, my friends.
Mark, could I close out your episode with one quote?
Sure. What's the quote?
I want to quote the immortal Socrates from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. No, actually, the philosopher. Question everything.